Thanks. Now, the first question, if I don't use the microphone, can you hear me? Or do you want me to use the microphone? You got both options. You want me to use the microphone? Okay. I'll just get it positioned here a bit differently. All right, well, 1 second. All right, let's get ready. We're going to start at 6, so this is, my name's John Aldig. I'm the Member of Parliament for Cloverdale, Langley City, and I'd like to begin by thanking everybody for coming out this evening to this town hall that we're doing. It's a fairly loosely structured agenda. I'm going to take about the first half hour to go through some items that my office has received correspondence on, questions about, that I thought would be useful just to explain, give some of the rationale behind some of these things. But that's not all we're going to talk about, so it's intended to be very open, and I have 3 questions that I was going to put out to the group just for your feedback, and then we have the last hour approximately is very open-ended for questions that you have. I'm also more than happy to take some questions as I go through the presentation while things are fresh in your mind. And although I don't want to get bogged down on one topic or one slide, so we'll try to move through the topics that I'm introducing to start with, and then move into the general discussion. Does that sound like a plan? Does that work for everybody? We're a very agreeable group here this evening, right? So we'll make it work to meet whatever your needs are. I also wanted to acknowledge one of my colleagues, Ken Hardy, Member of Parliament for Fleetwood Port Kells. And so Ken was able to join us this evening. We're both out of Ottawa for a 2-week constituency week. And Ken wanted to come and join me this evening. I'm very appreciative that he was able to come. So if there's a question I can't answer, I'll rely on Ken and pull on his wisdom as well. So
I'll make it up, John.
2 for the price of 1 tonight. It's my team. And it's very helpful to have my team here. So over on the table here, I have Deb Saul and Lynn Whitehouse. And Lynn and Deb are my constituency office managers. They're going to be taking notes this evening. And so if there are questions that we're unable to answer, that I need to get some additional information for you about, Lynn and Deb will note that. And we will be posting any of the discussion from tonight on my website, which is johnaldigmp.ca, and any answers and things that need follow up we'll also put on the website. So Lynn and Deb will be helping with that. I have Gunraj and Brett at the computer over here, my Ottawa team. Brett and Gunraj are both from our area, and so when we're home for long breaks from Ottawa, they both come back with me so that they can help out in the constituency and see their families. So, and then Christian is on social media. Christian helps with my Twitter, Facebook, and website accounts and Instagram as well. And then Kieran is one of my 2 case managers. And so when we have issues related to immigration, revenue, passports, any of the types of things that the federal government does, and we need to help out any of the constituents, Kieran's the first point of contact for those files. So if there are questions tonight or things that you need after, you're more than happy to introduce yourselves to my staff. So for this evening, as I say, we're going to do about 30 minutes on updates on topics that I've been hearing from. We'll then move into a bit of a guided discussion, and then close out with any things that haven't been answered or topics that you haven't had addressed. So with that, I'll get Gunraj to move to the first slide. And I thought I'd begin with what I think is a really good news item for our government. 2016 was the first budget that we introduced as a government. And it was really about trying to get money into the hands of working Canadians, into our middle class. And with that, one of the first actions we did was to cut the second tax bracket from 23% down to 20%. the figure, the estimate was that would put about $700 into anyone with income up to about $45,000 who filed for taxes. We also took a whole bunch of different federal programs that were for families and the raising of children, and there were a number of the programs that were non-taxable. There were other ones that were a taxable benefit, and so those were all lumped together into one program. We made it an income-tested program, and so up to earnings of about $100,000, people would get the maximum amount for their children aged up to 18 years of age. And then after $100,000, it would start tapering off, and at $200,000, we would wean families off of any government support. The philosophy behind it is that there are a lot of Canadians, but the sense was that when you got to the top 1% of earnings in the country, that you may not need as much support from the government. And with that, we had a really interesting statistic from October of this last year. Through that program, in our riding, there's about $7.5 million now per month that's coming into families in Cloverdale, Langley City. We have the second youngest population in our riding in British Columbia. Our average age is 36.5 years old. The youngest riding is Surrey-Newton, which is 36 years old. And the third youngest population in the province is Surrey Centre, which is, I think, 37 years old. So it shows that Surrey is a very young, has a lot of young families. And so a lot of the initiatives like the Canada Child Benefit really is aimed to help families who are trying to get ahead, particularly young families. And I'd like to thank our young family for coming out this evening. And yeah, I think exactly. Although I see a lot of young faces here, and I thank all of you for coming out as well. This year's budget continues to build on this the idea of helping get the economy going and get money into the hands of working Canadians. We looked at where the economy is at, and the sense is that Canada is really well positioned to lead on a number of fronts, and so we've really put a priority on innovation. And the sense is that as Canadians, we have great ideas, we have great universities that do a lot of leading edge research, and the idea is to try to invest so that we can take that information and there are, I think, 7 different areas that were identified where we feel that we can be leaders in innovation. And it's everything from the clean tech sector, so helping Canadians get off of a carbon-based economy and moving into more environmentally friendly ways of living and moving. So there's money in our budget for those types of things. We also believe that along with being competitive, we need to do things more efficiently. And so transit is set as one of our priorities. We've committed $20 billion over the next 10 years to help with transit improvements in Canada. And I'm really pleased that the government recognizes the growth that our region has, south of the Fraser. And so we've committed to 40% of a rapid transit improvement line. And there's actually 2 proposals in Surrey that we've agreed to fund. One of them is the L line that goes from Surrey Centre, I think, down King George, and then the other, anyway, it's an L-shaped line that pivots around Surrey Centre. And then the second is the extension of the Fraser Valley or Fraser Highway line going from King George to Langley City. We've committed 40%, which equates to about $1 billion. The province has come on board with 40%. And so now we're waiting to hear from TransLink and the metro region about how we will fund the remaining 20% and what the preferred technology is, whether it will be light rail or SkyTrain. But there's money on the table from the federal government for about $1 billion for improvements in our region. We've also agreed to another $1 billion. So overall, BC, the Lower Mainland in particular, has received commitment from our government for about 10% of that transit pot of money, which is really good for us as British Columbians, and particularly those of us who live south of the Fraser. We know that our growth is great, and that the transit service is not quite kept up with the needs that we have as a growing community. Housing, we've committed $11 billion over 11 years to help with housing. It's everything from affordable housing to some homelessness initiatives. And so on the housing front, we're working right now with the provinces, territories, and municipalities through Minister Duclos to develop a national housing strategy. And that will be rolled out in the coming months. but the idea that the federal government has not been involved in housing since the 1970s. And we've heard very clearly from the provinces that they would like to see us re-engage in the federal process, or to show federal leadership in housing. And so I don't have a lot of details on what that's going to look like in the end, but it's to say that we're willing to come to the table to provide some leadership and to work with the provinces and territories to deal with this really serious issue of housing shortages and unaffordable housing in Canada. The third area, childcare. We're looking at how we can expand childcare, so there is money on the table to help with childcare improvements. It's everything from childcare spaces to the infrastructure will be sorted out in the coming months. But the idea is that we realize that if we can help people with their family needs, that can help get people into the workplace, and the return to the economy and to society is great. And then the final piece, we recently signed an agreement with the province of BC on a health accord. We were able to put home health care as a priority, and we realized there are a lot of people who want to age at home. The sense is, though, that there are costs associated with that, everything from having home care assistance to renovating homes so that people, if they develop mobility issues, they may need to have some changes within the structure of their home. And so programs are being rolled out that will help people with aging at home. Things like the opioid crises that we've seen in British Columbia in particular, we've committed specific money to help them deal with that crisis. So overall, I think it's a very good budget that helps deal with some of British Columbia's specific needs. If you have other questions, we can go into that in the discussion part of the budget, but I just want to make sure that everybody realized or knows that our budget was tabled in March, and the implementation of that is now underway in Ottawa. The next slide that I wanted to, or topic that I wanted to introduce is M103, or Motion 103. And this was the anti-Islamophobia bill. And how many people heard anything about it? Can I just get a show of hands? So most of you picked up some things. I'll tell you that we had this to the office when this was before the House. And there was a lot of misinformation about what M103 was about, so I thought I'd take a minute and just walk you through what that is, and then if there's any questions, we can definitely talk about it. So first of all, to clarify the difference between a motion and a bill, a motion is non-binding on the government. And so it's something a tool that's used often to introduce things like a study. And so if somebody feels that there's an issue that's important to them or the constituents and they want to prompt the government to do something, they can introduce a motion. The M103 was introduced by one of our colleagues, Ikra, from Ontario. The way it was introduced as a private member's, or through private member's business. And on the first day of every new parliament, all of the members' names, excluding the cabinet members and parliamentary secretaries, their names are put into a hat, and they draw names out of the hat, and that becomes the order of being able to introduce legislation or motions into the House of Commons. And so Ikra's number was up a few months ago. As an example, my number is 79, and so I will be introducing my private member's bill or motion in, I'm scheduled now either the 5th last day of sitting before we rise for the summer, or when we go back in September. And so I'm working right now on my own piece of legislation. These private members' business or bills don't reflect the government's priorities. It's something that each of us as a member of parliament gets to. In Ikra's case, she has a strong Muslim population in her community. And she really felt there were some issues facing that community that she was concerned about. And so what Ikra did was introduced a motion, and I'll just refer to my notes because I don't have all of the specific pieces memorized. But the essence of her motion was that she called upon was that, in the opinion of the House, the government should, and then there's 4 parts here. So the first was to recognize the need to quell the increasing public climate of hate and fear. The second was to condemn Islamophobia and all forms of systemic racism and religious discrimination, and take note of House of Commons petition E411 and the issues raised by it. E411 was a similar anti-Islamophobia motion that was adopted by Tom Mulcair. It was passed unanimously in the House of Commons about a year prior, so So the House had already dealt with this kind of thing. Now, on the anti-Islamophobia piece, one of the concerning things we've seen in Canadian society is that hate crimes have been on the downward trend in Canada over the last decade, with a couple of exceptions. And one of them is that within the Muslim community, we've seen that hate crimes against that particular population double in the last 3 years. And so in Ikra's perspective, from her perspective, it was very much a sense that the community that she was representing was under, there was something happening there. And it was concerning to her and to her constituents. And so the sense was that she wanted to have a look at why through hate crimes and other acts of vandalism and essentially disturbing incidents. The important part of it is that it's not exclusive to Islamophobia, as I said in the wording. It talks about all forms of systemic racism and religious discrimination. So it was looking at things like hate crimes against visible minorities or linguistic minorities, as well as religious issues. We know, again, the Jewish community has also been under attack, and so it's not to exclude any of those issues, but it was to say that the Muslim population has seen something, an increase, unlike any of the other populations, and she felt that it would warrant having a study done to understand that, as well as general issues of racism and religious discrimination in Canada. And the action that was to come out of M103 was to ask the Standing Committee on Heritage to conduct this study. And then the final piece was to develop a whole-of-government approach to reducing or eliminating systemic racism and religious discrimination, including Islamophobia, and then my little footnote is including but not excluded to. And then saying, while ensuring a community-centric focus with a holistic response to evidence-based policy making. So really, what she was saying is, there's a problem, let's get it studied. And so that's, we've already had the vote on it, and I voted in favor of it. The sense was that that there is an issue, that it really did warrant this kind of extraordinary measure of having a study done, but to be inclusive of other religions and races as well. And so that is now being referred to the Standing Committee on Heritage. They will be doing a study. So what committees do? They're members of the Liberals, the Conservatives, and the NDP on all of the standing committees. And they will bring forward witnesses on this topic. They get to have expert testimony presented, then there's questions by the MPs, and a report is tabled in the House of Commons saying, here's what we found. The government will then provide a response back to that report as far as, will they act on any of the things, or some sort of response will come back. So that is where M103 is at now, and it has passed that first stage, and it's going to the committee for a study. But again, whatever comes out of it is non-binding. It's a way of having a discussion. I will also say that in Langley, as well as in Surrey, there are places of worship for the Muslim community. And while this bill was being debated was when the shootings happened at the mosque in Quebec City. And so it had actually been initiated prior to that event. But it really highlighted the need, the sense of attack that the Muslim community was feeling. So I've been to the Masala in Langley, and it really was, I found it quite touching. People simply want to practice their faith, raise their families. And the vote came, I felt, was very important to give support to that community, saying something is happening here in society, let's understand it and see how we can make it better for that population, but also for others. And so it's that inclusivity part that I found to be very important. So that's M103 and where it's at. Are you okay if I move on and we can come back to it, or, okay? And it's not to stifle discussion, but like I say, these are topics we've had interest or inquiries about, and so let's move on to the next one. The next one is pipelines and environment. And this one was, I found, quite surprising when we had made our announcement approving Kinder Morgan. I personally was expecting some feedback, some correspondence, and surprisingly, there wasn't a lot of a flood of correspondence. The feedback that we had was quite balanced. About half of it was probably 60% of the feedback we had had concerns about the decision, and 40% were very in favor of it. So in the campaign, our government had talked about trying to find that balance between the economy and the environment. And there have been concerns raised about, well, we're going to be taking more oil out of Alberta and burning it, and that doesn't help with climate change. I think that the really positive piece of what came out of the Kinder Morgan discussion is that it allowed the provinces and energy policy and climate change. We were able to sign on to the Paris Accord that has provided us with caps on emissions that we're working toward, and we were able to take that and work with the provinces to work on setting limits to future emissions, and we're now working on developing plans to bring down the overall emissions to meet our greenhouse gas targets over the next several decades. And so another really important piece is that the Kinder Morgan emissions that will rise from this project are actually within those national targets. So it's not in addition to new projects or things, it's within an overall framework. And I think that was a really important step for us to get to as a nation. Another thing that came out of that is that there are risks when you're transporting things like bitumen. And so the sense was that we need to invest in not only dealing with an incident should it happen, but to really try to mitigate and minimize the risks associated with it. So the Oceans Protection Plan was a project or an initiative that came out of this. And there are a whole bunch of pieces that arose from the Oceans Protection Plan. It's everything from how do we deal with noise from tankers that may have an impact on the South Resident killer whale or orca population, to how well are we prepared in the case of an incident. What are the other initiatives from navigable rules? So what ship that's being sent to Kinder Morgan or to the Burnaby facility, how will the ships be moved out to the ocean, how many tugboats are required, what's our spill responses. So a lot of effort went in, and again, British Columbia did quite well in receiving resources to help us prepare to deal with, and not only deal with an incident should it happen, but more importantly to minimize the risks to our coast. And I think that was a very positive initiative that was forced by the timeline related to the Kinder Morgan file. Protected areas. Our government has also signed on internationally to some protection, not only protocols but targets. And so there were the HE targets were agreed to by Canada in 2011 in Japan. And this said that by 2020, we would protect 10% of Canada's marine ecosystems and 17% of our land and freshwater ecosystems. Right now, as a nation, we're at just under 12, or around 12% terrestrial and freshwater, and we're less than 1% marine protection. And so the standing committee that I'm currently involved with is the Environment Committee. So our committee said, wow, it's taken us 150 years to get to less than 1% of marine protected areas and 12% terrestrial. The government needs some ideas on how we can accelerate this. So we did a study, and it was recently tabled in the House of Commons that gives the government a whole range of recommendations saying, here are some things that you could consider to help. The government actually had some money in the budget to help with some of those initiatives. So as an example, Parks Canada, which is the primary but not exclusive holder of protected areas, receives $364 million over the next 2 years in the management and expansion of the protected areas network. We also have recommended that there's a real opportunity to work with our Indigenous populations. There are reserve lands, there's traditional territories, and that are in many cases under threat. And so one of the bits of expert testimony we heard is that there's great examples of First Nations guardians or stewards, caretaker kind of programs. That probably the best example in the country is on Haida Gwaii, and where they have the Haida Watchman's program. And so it's getting people from that community onto the land, looking after their cultural and natural resources. And so the sense is that we can actually work with our Indigenous communities on a reconciliation program. And so there's $25 million to help develop that program in the next 2 years, and that will help support our Protected Areas Initiative. Coal phase out, we're working and putting money toward the phase out of coal in Canada, and that's over about a 30-year period. The idea is that once we can get ourselves off of coal, that equates to the removal of 1.3 million cars off of our roads. And so we're looking for some of those big wins that we can go after. And then finally, the idea of carbon pricing. We were able to develop it's something that as British Columbians we've had for many years already. And so it's already in place for us. And we've actually been able to show leadership as a province to the rest of the country on what it can look like. So the carbon pricing initiative is moving ahead. For seniors, there are a number of items that we've been working on. So as I mentioned, the budget commits money to investing in home care. And the idea is that it's cheaper and it responds to the needs of many Canadians who actually want to be in their homes as they age. And so we've committed funding to help with aging at home. The eligibility for old age security, there had been talk of moving that to 67 years old, and we made a commitment to keep it at 65. One of the interesting things is that the estimate is that 12,000 people will benefit from that. Because if they had to wait to 67, it would be 12,000 people who could have been affected, not having the income and income support that they need. And of that 12,000, 11,000 would be women. And so we used a gender-based lens to look at what the impacts would be on men and women. And it was found that if this change was made to 65, it really would have been quite harmful or disadvantageous to women. And so the rationale, I feel that there's strong agreement to keep the retirement age at 65, so that's what we've done. As I mentioned in my opening comments, $11 billion over 11 years to put towards. We're looking at two different ones. We've negotiated a deal with the provinces through Bill C-26 on improving the Canada Pension Plan, and this will be phased in over a period of, I believe, 7 years, but it doesn't start for a couple of years, and that's to help our young Canadians actually put more money into the plan, and so they will benefit down the road. And then C-27 is looking at only federally regulated pensions, which is about 6% of the Canadian workforce, and making some changes to the structure of those pension plans. The final, there was money put aside to help seniors in digital literacy. There's a sense that seniors are getting left behind in the digital world. Many people don't have access to the internet or the skills and training, and so there's going to be money dedicated to help seniors get online and plug into the digital world. And so that, I think, is a really important step to make sure that seniors have access to a range of services and that they're not being excluded just because they may not have the online skills. Marijuana legalization. This has been something that's generated some interest. Sorry, just need a drink. So last Thursday, Bill C-45 was introduced into the House of Commons, and there's really the main premise here is to try to make our streets and our youth safer. And right now in Canada, we have the highest level of marijuana consumption in the world. It simply has been a failed policy. Our youth have access. Last week when I was home, I did a couple of presentations in high schools, and this issue came up, and I said, well, there's marijuana in our community, and they said, sir, there's marijuana in our parking lot. Like, go out there now and you'll smell it. And the sense is that the kids have access to marijuana right now, and that's a concern. And so the idea is that we need to legitimize, but also through, not legitimize, sorry, legalize, and the idea, take control of the distribution. And so the legislation that was introduced actually sets it sets limits on possession amounts and what can be grown. We'll be working with the provinces and municipalities on a lot of the implementation details. But the idea is that to try to treat it in a similar way to alcohol and tobacco, and that if anybody sells to minors, there will be severe penalties imposed on them. And it really is to be treated as a public health issue, that we're trying to take marijuana, or the easy access that kids have right now, out of their hands and to make it more difficult to access. The other piece of it, it's the monetary piece, but this is not the primary driver. the sense is, though, that there is billions of dollars going through the economy, the black market, related to marijuana sales. I've heard figures of anywhere from $6 to $8 billion, and a lot of that goes into gangs. And so, in a street safer, we want to put it through a controlled system and have oversight and controls and frankly taxation. Like I say, the financial piece was not the primary driver. It very much is being approached from a public health piece. And so in our budget, we haven't even booked any revenues from marijuana sales into it. We don't want it to make it seem like this is a cash grab. It's just trying to deal with a public policy crisis that, or issue that we're facing, and recognizing that the current systems of dealing with it have not been effective, and we need to come at it from a different perspective. So, yeah, dealing with the access, the proceeds to organized crime, and the timeline that we're working at is to have the criminal aspect changed to make it not criminal to have marijuana by July 1st of 2018. And then at that point, we will still have to work with the provinces on the whole implementation piece. So where it will get distributed, that's not something that falls under federal jurisdiction. It's constitutional. It's constitutional. It will fall to the provinces. So there's still many details that need to be worked out. And but now that the legislation has been tabled, the provinces at least know what's in there. And I think you'll start seeing the beginning of thoughts and solutions coming from the provinces and municipalities now that they know what the federal response is to this issue. So that's the Bill C-45. Is a topic of interest is the modernization of the House of Commons. And this one has received a fair bit of attention in the last month or so. And again, lots of misinformation and misunderstanding about what's proposed here. So our government had, when we campaigned, was looking at how we can modernize the rules of the House of Commons. And since I've been elected in October of 2015, I realize every day that it's a privilege to be there, and I also realize that there are a lot of rules around the operation of the House of Commons that sometimes are not necessarily the most efficient or effective, and that it's probably time that we have a look at how the House of Commons conducts its business. So the House leader for our party, Bardish Chagar, took a discussion paper, kind of a thought paper, and there were a number of ideas that she put forward and sent to to PROC, the Committee on Procedure and House Affairs, and said, could you look at this, could you do a study on it, and bring in expert witnesses and see what modernization could be done. The idea wasn't to limit the committee's scope of the study, but it's like, here's some things we'd like to have looked at. And so there were a few ideas that were put forward. One of them was the idea of an introduction of a Prime Minister's question period. This is based on something that happens in England. And the spin that's being put on this is that the Prime Minister would then only have to show up in the House of Commons 1 day per week. And it's really, that's not the thinking behind it at all. The Prime Minister is accountable for the decisions of his government. And so our Prime Minister Trudeau, has actually, since this all started, has taken 2 Wednesday question periods and has answered almost all of the questions. One question was actually directed to one of the MVP members of Parliament, who answered very capably. But otherwise, with the exception of that question, the Prime Minister demonstrated his knowledge and awareness of issues that the opposition were asking of our government, to say, where are you at, what's it thinking, what's your response to this? By no means would that be the only time that the Prime Minister would be part of the question period or in the House of Commons. Right now, the Prime Minister takes about the first 10 questions every day in question period, and so the Prime Minister would still have that opportunity, and I would go as far as saying that obligation to be there. But it's also question periods a way for cabinet ministers to also defend their actions. So the thinking behind the Prime Minister's question period would be to put him in the hot seat, him or her, exclusively for 1 day per week. So that's that one. Another one that has been received some attention is the idea of canceling Friday sittings. So everybody knows, if you aren't aware of it, right now on Mondays we start at 11 o'clock and we go until 7. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the House sits from 10 in the morning until 7 at night. And on Fridays we go from 10 until 2. And so, and then we get home. And so particularly those of us from the Friday night, and so to serve our constituents, to deal with case files and types of files that Kieran's my frontline person on, to meet with constituents, it gives us Saturday to meet with people, hear their issues, to touch base with what are the issues that are important to you, and then on Sunday we're back on a plane to go back. So the idea behind this compressing of the hours would be to start earlier in the day, perhaps go later, Monday to Thursday, and then allow us to get out of Ottawa and home and be in the constituencies on Friday to have meetings and do these types of events, to have conversations with our constituents. So some of the material I've seen in the media is like, MPs don't want to work on Friday. Well, we don't want to necessarily work in Ottawa, we want to work at home. And so that's the thinking behind that piece. And then another one is looking at things like introducing electronic voting. Right now, part of the ceremony of the House of Commons is that we do public votes. And so whenever there's a vote on a motion, we're called by name, we stand up to have our vote registered either for or against. And each vote takes, what would you say, on a fast day it's 10 minutes, usually probably 15 minutes. And the idea is that if we could do electronic voting, it could actually speed up some of the functioning of the House. And there would still be a record of how people voted. In fact, there could be a record faster than there is. So the whole thing behind this is simply, let's have a discussion about what Canadians want in the operation of the House of Commons, and then bring it before the House for debate and decision that way. Anyway, I'll leave it at that, so that's kind of the thing. And so with that, are there any questions on any of these topics? I know I had a chance to meet with most of you on the way in, and there were some other things I've been asked to touch base on. And but are there topics, or questions on any of these topics? Or I can even make it a bit more open. It's just, are there other topics that you'd like me to go to?
Proportional voting?
Sorry?
Proportional
electoral reform? Sure, and that's what I said I would talk about. So, as many of you know, we had campaigned on making 2015 the last election held under first past the post. And so this was to change the voting system. Our government, myself included, I was on the special committee to study electoral reform. My committee traveled to every province and territory over about a 6-week period. We did hearings over the summertime with witnesses. And the minister at the time had a parallel process that was going on. She engaged, sent out somewhere around 15 million postcards to every household in the country to get thoughts on electoral reform. What ended up happening is that we had somewhere between 1% and 3% of Canadians engaged in the process. And it seemed that it would be a very big step to change the entire voting system. Our Prime Minister has announced that we're not going to proceed with it. It would tell that we didn't have the support of Canadians to go with a full change of the electoral systems. I remain hopeful that we'll continue having a conversation. And in fact, our Minister of Democratic Institutions is introducing legislation in the near future that deals with a number of issues related to some of the challenge we have with the current electoral system. So, for example, one of the issues that we're trying to address through going to a different system is that we've had declining participation rates in essentially westernized democracies over the last number of years. And in particular, the number of youth voting is on a decline. And so one of the measures that's being proposed is that we'll actually work with the provinces to develop a database, a registry of youth at the age of 16. And the idea is that if we can get youth to vote the first time, the evidence shows that the likelihood of them continuing to vote for the rest of their lives greatly increases. And so right now, by having it done at 18, many of them have already graduated from high school. We lose track of where they are. And so the idea is that we'll try to capture them when most of that age group are still in school, get them into Elections Canada database so that they can at least be contacted. There are things like the reintroduction of the Chief Electoral Officer's ability to educate. The producer and was very much limited to running elections. And we feel that there is a role for a nonpartisan education role of the Chief Electoral Officer, and so that will be looked to being brought forward. Other pieces, reintroducing vouching, and that was something that had been taken away under the last the previous government. And so this is, it was a way, the results were that many of our disenfranchised Canadians, so those who may be homeless, a number of our Indigenous citizens, wouldn't have ID, and so under vouching you could have somebody who knew you could say, I know who this person is, and they could actually be able to cast the vote. The identification requirements were really tightened up, and there were people, Canadians, that could not vote as a result of that in 2015, so we're looking at changing that. So there will continue to be improvements made to the electoral system, but as far as throwing everything out and starting over with a new system, that is off the table right now. Now, another topic that I was asked to touch.
Make a point about it. I was reading today's blog. One of them was an article by Vaughan Palmer here, and he said that the electorate, well, the 18 to 34-year-old demographic in the last federal election increased.
Right.
So your comment you made earlier, that demographic was decreasing, is incorrect.
Well,
now, part of it was the Trudeau factor, I admit, and he does point that out. The other thing being is I went to one of your electoral reform things, sort of made it sound so hard to be involved in the process. If you complete your tax return, there is a box on there, do you want to register? Done. When an election occurs, you get a card in the mail saying, you know, here it is. It's not hard to be involved. Most universities actually have candidates on site. My daughter's at UVic, and they had all candidates for that there on site at one point or other. They actually had a polling station on site.
Yeah, and those sorts of efforts are great, but there's also a number of students who graduate from high school or don't graduate or don't go on to university, and so we're trying to be more inclusive of that younger population.
So put an education system in there.
Okay. Yeah, well, and that's where the idea of allowing the Chief Electoral Officer to have that education mandate again is really important. On the issue of the blip in youth participation in 2019, you're absolutely right. And I would go beyond just the Trudeau factor. The sense was that people were looking for a change in government, and we know that that tends to increase. What we need to do is see if that same increase will happen in 2019. But the general trend has been down, so you're right in correcting me that there was a blip up, but we don't know if that's a permanent, if youth all of a sudden become re-engaged, or if if we'll see a decline again. So it's just trying to address that general downward trend.
The trend of the demographics is, as you get older, you get more interested in politics, and the voting percentage increases. That's always been the case on any country where it is not compulsory voting, and that tends to be partly because as people get more conservative, they're more concerned about things. When we get older, they get more conservative. They get more concerned about what the government is doing for them and everything else. They see it as a bigger part of their life, or it has a bigger impact on their life. They're more involved in it. So I think that's what I come back to the education, is that it needs to be in school. Now, I went 30-something years ago, 40 years ago, when I was at school, and I'm Australian, and I learned in there. But in school, it was part of the education plan. It was included.
And this is something
so it was.
On the committee I was on, we heard that many of the provinces have actually dropped this kind of election engagement piece from their curricula. And that's something that we can't control because it is a provincial mandate, but I think it's a conversation as Canadians, and if we feel it's important, particularly at the provincial level, that we can have those conversations and say we do feel that this is important. Other things, your reference to Australia, we looked at things like mandatory voting, and that's something that's used in Australia. The sense was that we're not ready as Canadians to do that, or we're not at the crisis point. But it's a tool that could be available to deal with declining participation. And that was the idea of online voting. And there were real concerns, real flags raised about that related to cyber security, the threats of hacking, and if you compromise your electoral system, if you lose the confidence of Canadians, that it would be very difficult to recover. So we're told to be very careful about that. One of the things I found very surprising on online voting is when we heard from experts was a woman who studied it quite extensively dispelled the thought that I had, which would be you do online voting, you're going to increase the participation of youth. But in places that have done it, the greatest increase is by older, affluent white people. And I found that surprising, but it seems to be that there's, in many cases, greater digital literacy, greater access to things like the internet, and so it didn't solve the problem people thought it would. Another one where I think there's some opportunities to explore was a very touching bit of testimony that we heard in Toronto from a woman who was legally blind. And she talked about, she was in her early 50s and made a comment that she does not know in confidence who she has ever voted for, even though she's always voted. She said she knows who she thought she was voting for and who she told the person who was given to her to assist in her voting who she wanted to vote for, but she did not have the certainty to say that that's who she actually put her ex beside. And so her plea was to be able to explore the use of technology that she has in her home to vote. And so I think that related to online, or that have specific needs, that we could test it and see what kind of gains we could make without going to everybody all at once. So I think we'll continue exploring those types of things, and I hope all the governments continue to look at how we continue to include our respective populations in the electoral systems.
I think the other thing with the electoral reform that seems to be overlooked is that a lot of people think that votes don't count. Because, if you vote for a third party, you get the Green Party, for example, running its provincial election. If you don't think they have a chance to win, you might just say, oh, hell, I'm not going to vote. So I think that's something, I don't know what your statistics are on that, but I think it's pretty high, the number of people who don't vote because they think the vote doesn't count.
Yeah, and I don't have an answer to what that is. I think that there are definitely Canadians who feel outside of the current system and don't participate or spoil their ballot or do other things.
I don't mean people
who just don't vote. Yeah, and there's a whole bunch of factors that come into play, and I think it's again, that's something that as Canadians I hope we continue to look at and see. When we have enough Canadians getting involved in the system saying, this is important, then I think we need to be prepared and ready to have change. One of the experts came before the committee and they said people are taking to the streets with torches and pitchforks. They said, don't get to that kind of crisis because you're going to be rushed into something. So I think right now we're not in that kind of crisis situation, but there are people who are saying, let's have a look at it. It's like this is a time for us to have a thoughtful conversation about where we want to go as Canadians. And I hope that continues.
This is not democratic. The system we have now first past the polls. It's not a democratic system.
Yeah, well, I don't know if everybody can hear the comment was it's not democratic, the existing system. And so without debating it, this is where we're at with the electoral reform.
It's democratic. End of story.
I'm just going to move over to this gentleman. And what I'm going to try and do is get through everybody who's here so everybody has a chance for one question or one comment, and then if there's more, then we'll keep going around until we run out of time. We booked the room until 8 o'clock. We have another hour, and this is what it's about, is for you to give me feedback, and I'm not here to necessarily defend. I'll give explanations for things we've done, but this is about having a conversation now and raising questions. So we'll go, sir, to you, and then we'll go to Matt.
Well, you commented that when you had your committee going around, you had a very low percentage of interest, apparently. So I wonder, what if we just had a straw vote here to see how many people would like to see proportional voting continue to just sort of straw vote. See how much.
Sure, we can do that, but I think that the risks with things like straw votes is that are we a representative example of?
Yeah, see, that's exactly.
Okay.
Well,
and how many would be opposed to it? And there would be, I'm guessing, some that would be opposed, and some that aren't quite ready to weigh into the conversation.
I'm suggesting this just to give you a sense of what people are thinking.
Right. And I'll tell you, the town halls that I had, there were people who were motivated to come out, who had given this a lot of thought, people who, some who had spent years working at the kitchen table on alternate systems and gave really thoughtful reasonings. And then there were a lot of people that didn't come out that, you know, I talked to at the grocery store or, you know, various places, and it's like, what do you think of electoral reform? It was interesting, when we landed in Victoria, I went to, I got off the plane, and there was a welcome committee of people saying, you know, the ER is in town, you're welcome, and which was short for electoral reform. And so I went over to grab a coffee at the coffee counter while people were waiting for the bags to come off the carousel. And there was the barista, a WestJet employee, and then one of the people from security. And one of them was saying, the conversation was going like, what's ER? And I said, oh, it's electoral reform. I'm in the know, I can share this with you. And they said, what's ER? And I said, electoral reform. And they asked one more time, I said, it's electoral reform. And the woman, the barista said, I don't even know what language you're speaking. And it's like, you know, the voting system, it's like, oh, whatever. You know, can I get you a coffee? And it just, like, there wasn't a level of engagement. And I think that's what we're hoping for, is to, you know, to get and keep people engaged in the back.
Yeah, change the subject
Sure.
to, on the pipeline.
Yeah.
Did your government withdraw approval for the Northern Gateway? And if so, why? Why did it decide on the Kinder Morgan instead of the Northern Gateway? Why go through the most densely populated area when I believe the Northern Gateway was already approved by the previous administration?
No, at the same time that Kinder Morgan was going through, there were three decisions that were made. So one was a pipeline from Alberta through the prairies to the States. So that one was approved. Kinder Morgan was approved, and the Northern Gateway had not been approved. And
It
so
hadn't been.
It hadn't been, and so we had to do the review. The National Energy Board had done their process, and the decision was made on that one that the risks were too great for the environment. There was also the level of input and support from the First Nations along that route was not there. The other piece was that the coastline is much more difficult. Like right now, and through the southern route, we already have the shipping lanes, and so the sense was that that's the best way to put the product to market. So Northern Gateway wasn't, the decision wasn't reversed on that one. It wasn't approved, and there were a number of reasons for that. The other thing related to Kinder Morgan is that it's an existing pipeline. So essentially, I think it's for 90% of it, it's following the existing route. And so the sense is that that pipeline has been in place for a number of decades, and so increasing the capacity, it's not like it's going into new territory. And so there were a whole bunch of reasons. There were also 157 conditions were imposed on Kinder Morgan from the federal government that need to be met before that can go through. And the sense was that there were, it simply would not have been possible to do Northern Gateway. So that's how we got to that decision. Ken, was there anything else that you want to add to that particular?
Not particularly, except for the development of the American election and the U.S. President's approval of the Keystone XL, which will take Alberta oil to the Gulf of Mexico, Texas. And there could be some questions arising as to whether or not that development may, in fact, negate the need for the Kinder Morgan line, because that too was going to take Alberta oil and it would end up in the States.
It's kind of although Keystone had been approved by the previous government, the reason it hadn't gone ahead was because of the American decision. And so all of our approvals as a nation are already in place for that. And that was done by the previous government, so we won't be changing any of those. And so now that Trump said it will go ahead, that will be taking oil through a different route. So that's one that we'll be following as well.
Change of topic?
Sure, yeah, and that's about it. Like I say, we can talk about whatever you want now.
In regards to Bill C-45 for the marijuana legislation, I've heard a couple of times now this argument that it actually will make it less accessible for youth. And I'm not quite understanding how we're like enabling youth now with marijuana? Like, what is it that we're changing, that this law is going to change that's going to make it less accessible?
Sure. The sense is now that marijuana is on the streets, it's accessible to kids to buy through the black market, essentially.
So
Right.
I'm just going to pause because I guess that's the other thing that I would want you to address. Like, what is it that we're going to do differently? Because I'm assuming that we're not like really encouraging marijuana, on the street right now. So what is it that we're going to be doing differently in that sense?
This actually changes the criminal code to go after illegal producers. You're right, like it's already illegal, so we go after it. It's just, I don't think there's this culture around marijuana in BC in particular, but also in Canada, that has evolved. And the sense is that it is in society already, and so youth are accessing it. So the idea is to legitimize the distribution channels, and to provide greater controls. So in the legislation, it talks about limits on marketing, on how it can be promoted. So it's not to it's just trying to say that we're going to put it on the market legally, but that youth won't be able to access it the way that they can now from street vendors, because if somebody's caught, the intention is to actually have strict laws that will be enforced.
So are we not enforcing laws now? Sorry, I'm
Not-
not
no,
putting you on the
if you
spot,
look,
but-
there are trafficking laws that are enforced, but again, it's not touching the kind of volume. It's not. So trafficking, possession laws are enforced. So people have certain quantities. You hear of people being busted and having criminal charges. In fact, this is one of the discussions that we've had in the House of Commons. The question is, why aren't we what's the word, decriminalizing right now while we wait for the process to legalize? Because there will be people, youth in particular, that will have charges laid against them, will have that mark on their record. And the response that our government gives is that right now it is still illegal, and until we actually have a legal framework that it's illegal, and so those rules apply. If we were to decriminalize, you still have the gangs and other methods of growing and distributing in place that don't have quality controls, that don't have a public interest, public health filter applied to it, and so it's not working right now.
One of us all around, because we all remember different pieces of the story. The key thing really is to make it an unprofitable business for organized crime. So if you legalize it, regulate it, and carefully pick the age at which people can access it, then the intention there is that you make it not worthwhile for organized crime to be as heavily involved in this. What comes out of this then is a discussion about the legal age, because there will be medical people who will say, well, to have it at 18 is a little too young. Unfortunately, if you put it up to 21 or 25, you are leaving them a big enough market for organized crime to continue to make it profitable. The other piece has to do with the pricing of the taxation. Again, if the price is too high, or with the taxation, it makes it economically feasible for organized crime to stay in the business, then you've defeated the purpose of what you're trying to do. So these are all considerations, but key thing with C-45 is that unlike the other jurisdictions that legalize marijuana, C-45 takes a health-centered approach, not an economics-centered approach. And that's the reason why a lot of jurisdictions now are looking very carefully at how we're doing this.
It doesn't look like an answer to your question.
No, you answered the
prohibition has not worked. And even enforcing what's there, we're not going to take it off the streets. And so it's how do we rethink how we can do it in a different way and try to at least take it out of the most vulnerable segment, which is our young people. And that's, I think, the thing behind it. As Ken says, there's going to be critical pieces. The price point. If we get the price point wrong, then it opens up the market for the black market, and then it does address the issue. So these are all things that we'll be debating and studying over the coming months as this legislation moves forward.
Has it ever been legalized in any other country? And has it
Yes.
worked? Like what are the
There are examples, as in, right now in the states, so Washington State, Oregon, and Colorado are 3 states that have done it. I don't know about, Rebecca, do you know? Yeah, okay. As far as countries, like I've been told that Canada's being watched very closely as a nation to see how we do it, because there are other countries that want to, to look at it and see what experiences we're able to provide.
A couple of Scandinavian countries have legalised it. It was decriminalised in Australia about 20 odd years ago.
Okay.
I don't know. And I think a couple of the European countries that pretty well never have.
Uruguay, I think, is one that I heard recently.
No, it's actually illegal
is
in the
legalized.
States don't
I
enforce
think Uruguay's a
law.
population of 3.5 million, so a
No,
bit of a
it's
different
legal.
situation. But so there are
But
some
there's a couple
examples
of
that
Scandinavian
on a national scale,
It is
and
legal.
for the size of the territory here. Oh, count that as your question, by the way.
Just with regards to marijuana doesn't affect you. What about on crossing the border into the States? Now, I know that various states have legalised it, but nationally, federally there, it's still illegal. I know you can't transfer it across. I know that's all fine. But if you happen to be a user in Canada and you go across the line and you say, or have used it in the dim dark past, and you say, yes, I've used it, you can be barred from entry. What's going to happen at that point?
These are the types of questions that I don't think we have an answer. I've read through the bill, and that kind of thing hasn't been resolved yet. So there will be lots of those details in the implementation we'll have to sort out. If anybody didn't hear, the question was, in the States, you can be barred entry for using marijuana now, because it's an illegal substance. And in the States, although the states have legalized it nationally, it's still illegal. And so if if it's legal in Canada and you need to admit to using it, can the states bar you? Those will be the types of things we'll have to sort out. Another one that's of huge interest and concern people is impaired driving laws, and how do we deal with that. And so there is legislation that has been introduced at the same time to deal with the penalties related to impairment. And so that is going lockstep ahead with Bill C-45. I didn't bring a copy of that bill, but I did bring C-45. You know what? Anyway, we can, if anybody's interested in that copy on the website, so you have access to it. Is there anybody who hasn't had a chance to weigh in the conversation who would like to ask anything, share any thoughts? I don't want to put Rebecca on the spot, but you must be in the thick of things right now, and any thoughts from your perspective that are front of mind for you federally, or are you very immersed right now in provincial?
I'm not immersed federally, I'm running provincially, it's for Cloverdale. I am very interested in your discussion on pipelines.
Okay.
I'm also very interested in further discussion about electoral reform. It was a platform issue for the party. And I personally feel that if you ran on a platform and got elected with overall backing of that platform, you can't then say there's not enough interest in our doing this because it was one of your pillars. So I think that's hypocrisy. And frankly, a lot on part of Trudeau saying it's the last first past the post election. That's me personally. I came tonight to hear what everybody else was interested in, and specifically to those, and following up on us. Always here to take you and hold you accountable.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope everybody knows Rebecca Smith, the NDP candidate for Cloverdale, and and Rebecca ran against me and was an admirable foe, and we had, I think, many respectful and interesting discussions over the course of our campaign. But on the platform piece, it's been interesting what's getting out of 47 items on our platform, and how many people voted for us based on that, and these are things we'll never know. I have had people say to me that they're disappointed that we're not moving forward with it, and that they voted for me based on that. And then I've had others say that they actually want me as their member of parliament focusing on things like trade with the U.S., given the changes in the comment south of the border, and that's where they'd like our government to put our efforts right now to make sure that we'll have a positive trade relationship with the States going into the future, because that could do real damage to us if we don't get that right. So it's about, with the time we have, where do we put our efforts, but yeah, these are all part of the the tough discussions of politics. And so I appreciate that. Thanks for that. Anybody else who hasn't been a Christian?
John, there's a question from Gurman on Facebook, and he says, "Hi John, can you please speak about what we're doing to stop the illegal flow of aliens from the U.S. into Canada, particularly in Manitoba?"
Okay.
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
Yeah, so the illegal flow of aliens, so border crossers, refugee claimants coming into Canada, and in particular in Manitoba. So there's been some interesting discussions on this in the media. There's a misperception, I would say, that people who run the border are getting a free pass. And we have had discussions with Ralph Goodale, the minister responsible for public safety, and he's reassured us and reiterated that when people cross the border illegally, in many cases they're being taken, we've seen pictures of the RC employee taken back to the border crossing to be processed. And essentially the same rules apply, so people still have to be screened, they have to make sure that they qualify as refugees, and it's not that they're being given a free pass by doing that. The sense is that we're trying to get the word out that you're not cutting corners by crossing the border illegally. We're encouraging people to continue to go to the border, make a legitimate claim. If people cross the border and aren't caught, the sense is that eventually we will catch up with them. The immigration laws will catch up with them, and they will need to face the rules of the country. So, to the question, I would say, we're continuing to process people, and if they don't meet the criteria, they are being deported or not allowed to stay in the country. So it's very much not getting a free pass on crossing the border illegally. Ken, is there anything
one other thing, I happened across some information that this is a hot button issue right now, and of course everybody was thinking that there would be more activity like this because of the election in the States. Interesting to note that 10 years ago, we had actually double the number of people crossing the border than we are today. It's just the context of today and the fact that it's drawn that much more attention. So we've been there before, and we managed it before, and we're managing it.
I actually hadn't heard that.
Just,
Yes.
I think something you said, I think this kind of just keeps tweaking my mind just a little bit, is about the whole income situation. And I don't understand how, from our personal perspective, obviously we're a growing family, and in this riding, we're talking about middle class and middle whatever, and $100,000 thrown out there as a cap of something. But I don't know if there's studies shown, because I know across Canada it's different, and BC is very expensive to live in. But I know our family, we are homeowners in this riding, and we cannot afford a second car. But we're maxing out at your thresholds where we no longer need government support because we make too much money, and so that's pushing us past middle class. But we live in a very, very, very middle class home, and we've had to renovate the whole entire home because when we bought it, it was the cheapest house we could find in Surrey, except for grow-ups and the houses that have been ripped apart and all that. Like, obviously not safe for growing families to live in. So it's like we have the cheapest house we possibly can find, and at that time the province had brought down the stuff, so we've been homeowners for 3 years, and we're trying to make ends meet and trying to do that sort of stuff. We don't believe in debt in our home. Obviously a mortgage is debt, but not the whole, what we're throwing out there as what middle class is it's like, but what are couples making to then be all this, and we're doing assisted homes and all these sort of things, which is great. I totally believe in giving to the poor. We're very generous people as well. But I just don't get where we're all lining up here, because we're not helping, it doesn't help middle class. Or I feel like I'm middle class, I don't feel like I'm upper class. And yet all these categories categorize us as potentially upper class, and I'm like, no, I buy the 30% off things at the superstore because, I want to buy meat and stuff like that. And so it's so And I don't have a pot of bag, I'm not a big spender, and it's like, but then all these categories aren't saying that I'm middle class, and I don't feel supported in BC. I get that in maybe Nova Scotia or some other places, like the cost of housing is different, but in our riding here, I don't see that would be so much for, it's not a good standard, I guess, cost country. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, you're not the only one that I hear expressing exactly what you're saying. When I was out campaigning and with my team, I was out for months and months beforehand, and for young families in our community trying to get ahead is really difficult. And so it's a sentiment I think that programs is that if you start regionalizing things or localizing things, it gets really complex really quickly. And so, to your point, our cost of living here is different than a lot of other places in the country. So a line has been chosen. Now, it's not completely arbitrary. There was an article this week I was reading in the Vancouver Sun about, what is middle class and what are the levels of income earnings. And I'm probably going to get it wrong, but I was surprised. I think it's around $80,000 was the median household income in the province.
Right.
And so, our programs were designed to help those. The sense is that when you get, I think it's $180,000 puts you in BC in the top 1% of earners. And so the sense, and I know that $200,000 when you're dealing with daycare or just diapers and a mortgage and one car, let alone two, and not having access to transit, so having to have a car to drive around, like the costs add up really quickly. And but like when I was 200,000 or 180,000 is in the top 1%, and so the sense was that should people in that bracket be getting the same level of government subsidy as somebody who is making the $70,000 or $80,000 for their household? And so our government made a decision to I think it's up, is it 120,000? Canada Child Benefit. It's either 100 or 120,000. You get the full benefit, and then it starts tapering down. And at 200,000, that top 1%, that as much as people have pressures, that there are others with greater pressures, and that you can, in theory, look after.
But then that's not middle class. Like that's, I think, the class phrase I have an issue with. That's not middle class then, because if it's 80% is the median, like $20,000 is like, but then that's at the 100,000, and that's starting to tip you off the scale, and then, but that's not really like.
But it's a paring back, not a cutoff.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the design of the program. The other thing is that it was the Canada Child Benefit's designed to be non-taxable. And so that saves some money. But I fully appreciate what you're saying, that, and it is a message that we keep hearing, that young families in our community are struggling.
Yeah.
And that and this is where we need to look at, how do we do things like affordable daycare, how do we invest in transit, how do we invest in good jobs so that people can, across society, bring their levels of earning up. How do we deal with housing prices, affordable housing? And these are all the societal pressures that we're facing, particularly our young families, but there's a lot of seniors I'm talking to who may have moved to the Lower Mainland and who don't have the equity, the longer living families in the Lower Mainland have built up in their properties. So we have some issues here, and so what I'm talking about, these are some of the solutions that our government's put forward. We're 2 years into our mandate, and hopefully we'll continue getting the things right.
Because then it just goes into more tax,
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, it's kind of like trying to get, well, if we're here for that median, group of people, then it's like.
And like I said, the tax break that we did in our first year was on income between 43,000 to 90,000, and so anybody earning 90,000 would have $700 savings in their income taxes at the federal level. And so it's measures like that we looked at. Now I've had others say, well, why didn't you cut the first tax bracket? But there also is an affordability issue. Actually, one of the things that I'll talk about too that has come up is related to the budget and the deficit that we're incurring. And some have raised that as an issue. I think this year the deficit were about $25 billion. And the sense is that we want to invest in things that will help grow the economy and help moving people and goods more efficiently and getting better jobs going. And so a lot of the investments, it's on innovation, it's in transit, it's and trying to get the jobs going that address the kind of things that you're speaking about. We are very concerned about the ratio of debt to GDP, or gross domestic product. And the sense is that if we can borrow money but grow the economy, as long as that ratio remains in check, that we're willing to do that. And that is a bit different from party to party, and the stand that has been taken, we're making, are going into areas we feel will help these affordability and growing the economy kinds of issues facing our families. Who hasn't had a chance to ask a question that's near and dear to them?
Okay, so I have a question about NAFTA.
Okay.
So it was under attack again today, and the great the champion president of the United States again mentioned about number and dairy, although they are not covered in the NAFTA. And he pointed, I mean, he named Canada, that Canada is being exploiting the US market and so on and so forth. So is there any planning, any working on plan B or life without NAFTA or something like that?
Yeah, great question, as they all have been, and I'm sure we'll have more great questions as we go through the evening. But the U.S. situation right now under President Trump, it's very complex, and it changes from time to time. And so, we're investing a lot of resources and effort in both the education of U.S. politicians on the importance of this relationship, and as the tone changes, being able to respond to them. So this week there was a letter that was released publicly from the Canadian ambassador to the United States about the dairy issue and setting the record straight on some of the what we believe are misstatements or misinformation that was made. Things, softwood lumber has been front of mind for over a year. We're continuing to work on that one. But it's encouraged us as politicians to develop and build relationships with our U.S. counterparts. And so as an example, the Environment Committee that I sit on will be traveling to Washington, D.C. and meet with a number of our colleagues to deal with environmental issues. The Trade Committee has been meeting with their counterparts. And each of the cabinet ministers has been set up to work with, I think it's 3 state leaders, representatives at the state level. So it very much is about trying to continue to keep the Americans aware of the importance of this relationship. There have been some positive steps made. So prior to the Prime Minister going to the States, there's been a real push on some of that education, and I think it's 35 or 37 states that have Canada as their primary trade partner. And so that actually has come out in President Trump's statements, acknowledging that we are good for the American economy and that there's been this long-standing relationship. What the future of NAFTA holds, we don't know, but this is where we need to invest efforts into that relationship, because if we don't get it right, it can hurt our economy, it can hurt our chances as a nation to get ahead. And so, and then there's other things, like the European trade agreement that was finalized. We're looking at how we can do trade internationally, but it's a complex one, and I think we're prepared to deal with it, but it's a complex relationship right now.
You were mentioning trying to increase the economy and increasing businesses, and I have concerns with the carbon tax. How is that going to me, that's going to decrease the possibility of businesses too much carbon tax.
Yeah, the question is on the carbon tax and how that affects competitiveness and the growth of the economy.
And from what I understand, it's only going to get worse, but as in the amounts that we can have to pay. And from my own study, I don't believe that carbon is what's causing the issue. So I have a real problem with putting up money for carbon tax. But yeah, the environment is great and decrease pollution and that sort of stuff, but and then where is that money going? How does that help carbon dioxide?
Right. Yeah. So the philosophy behind the carbon tax is that it's not to generate revenue for the government. at least with the federal government statements. So the negotiations that we've had with the provinces, it's to get them to agree to a price on carbon which provides an incentive to move to greener forms of energy. So our sense is that it does help with an innovation economy. And so it's not saying that we can't conduct business, but it's like it's going to force us to find other ways of doing business.
And Ontario has shown that it's not worked well there at all, and Alberta, just the last one.
Well,
right?
so
their economies have gone right down.
But not related to the carbon tax. Like in Alberta, there's been a lot of things that carbon tax, we have the strongest economy in the country. And so I think that there are things that can be done that that won't hurt the economy. But each of the provinces has to figure out how they're going to deal with it. It's not something that falls under federal jurisdiction. So in BC, the agreement that was made years ago when it was introduced is that it would be applied to our personal income tax. And I don't know where we're at now, but I think we were the lowest or one of the lower personal income taxes. So although we pay at the pumps for carbon, it's applied back to our personal income taxes. And so provinces construction.
How's that?
The money that's raised from it is actually used to lower the personal tax rate. And I don't know where we're at provincially. Rebecca shaking your head, but I know I've heard at least the current government talk about how that happens, and if anybody wants to hear a different perspective, maybe go to the provincial candidates forums that are coming out. But the sense is that it's collected. First of all, it can also be set by province or from province to province about what areas can be excluded. There are exclusion parameters or rules. So I think in some cases, like agriculture can be excluded so that it doesn't affect things like the cost of produce. But it's a way of encouraging provinces to look at the level of emissions that they have and what are the ways of trying to bring those down. And in the meantime, find alternate sources of energy that won't have the same environmental impacts. On your comment about whether you believe in climate change or not.
No, not climate change.
Okay.
Carbon dioxide produced climate change.
Okay, but on that though, there's been some interesting things as we were driving. As I was driving today to various meetings, I was listening about as we see the Earth's temperature rise. Things like, some of the methane off gas that we're seeing coming out of the Arctic areas, and then those things compound. Or if we see the loss of forest, then that can add to things. So it's not all carbon dioxide, but I think the general sense is that something is changing. Human causation is, I think, has been proven in
the 30s they had warming that was not at all due to carbon dioxide.
But anyway, I won't debate that tonight. Our government feels that based on the evidence that there are enough reasons to have a call for action. And so anyway, this is where we're headed, and I think it's the right way to go right now for what we're facing.
Including carbon capture within the carbon tax or not?
Carbon capture?
Carbon capture.
Capture.
Saskatchewan's still in the carbon capture. They prefer carbon capture to the carbon tax,
right,
unless they've changed their policy recently.
And
there's various other,
that's going recently.
and in the US, various states are also looking not a carbon tax, they're also looking at carbon capture. That's a whole big industry that we're not even touching.
Right. And I believe that there are opportunities again for innovation, and if we can find the right technology that can help with those things, it's all worth exploring and contributing to the issues that we're facing. So this is where I think it's how can we compete internationally, how can we innovate, and it could be on carbon capture and.
Well, on the innovation thing, why don't you look at things like solar panels is a big one at the moment. Tesla has just released new solar panels which basically tiles for your roof. They're the same size as a cedar shake on the roof. Completely done. In Melbourne University, they've come up with basically a solar panel you can roll up and take with you. Those are the sort of things. And if you try and get them here, you pay huge amounts of money and you can't even get them. And then there's no incentive to do it.
Yeah,
You know, they're the sort of things,
those
as far
are-
as innovation, why isn't the government looking at those sort of things to you know, as a whole industry, not even touching? And then people want to use it.
Well, and the whole clean tech sector is an area that we said we will invest in, and there are programs being rolled out to help that kind of thing. So it is a priority for our government. We're trying to move in that way, and yeah, so that's where we're headed on carbon tax. I'm just going to move over, sir.
Yeah, to the carbon tax, although the carbon tax is revenue neutral, okay, but the GST applied to it is not. That I've got a real problem with.
Yeah, you know,
Why are we applying a tax?
Right,
to that?
and that's one that we have, since that perspective or piece of information came out, we haven't been in Ottawa, and so I haven't been able to inquire about that to our finance department. So I don't have an answer, but I'm more than happy to look into it when we're back in Ottawa in 2 weeks and send a note to the finance department and post it to the website for your information. So this was, for anybody who didn't hear, it's the in the media, it's been reported recently that there'll be GST applied to the carbon tax, which moves away from the cost neutrality, and I don't have a response to that because it's new information. So, and you know, the budget bill is working its way through the legislative, the approval process right now.
The GST is not new to it, it's been in there for years.
Yeah, but this, like I say, this new information, I don't have any updated stuff, so I can get that to you. Lynn will note that, and we will get something posted with Christian's help. I'm not going to necessarily, well, I was going to say, do you have anything you want to this? Okay. So the question for the front, what's our government doing to increase the involvement of women in politics? What are we doing? I think that you know, that there are a couple of things. One was the gender-based or balanced cabinet to show that you know, that women can hold the highest positions in the country and demonstrate extreme confidence and competence at that ability. So I think that there's, you know, we're establishing a great track record and role models for women who may want to enter politics. I think that part of the modernization of the House of Commons is looking at some of the barriers. In many cases, women are still have a lot of the primary caregiving responsibilities, and so there are disincentives to women wanting to enter politics because of travel and hours and things like that. So that's some of the issues that we're looking at to try to increase the overall appeal. Anybody else who hasn't had a chance? I'll just come back to you in a second. I just want to give everybody who hasn't had a chance to ask a question. Otherwise, we'll go for round two. Anybody who hasn't? Okay, over to you, and then we'll go to the map.
So you've discussed M103, and I still have a question as to why, when the Conservatives proposed a motion saying, but with more than just Islamophobia, why not look at all of the, I guess, attitudes against people? Because there are probably more attacks on Jewish buildings or people, kids in university. Jews, they have a huge issue in those universities. So why not do the whole picture as opposed to one group of people?
Yeah, I would say that Ikra's motion was very much about her constituency and what was important to her community, and so Islamophobia was seen to be of particular concern. As I said, the Muslim community has seen a greater increase than any other community, including the Jewish community. Now, that's not saying that the Jewish community is not important, because they are, and any population that's subject to hate crimes needs to be looked at. And so, in Ikra's motion, it was to say, under, you know, from her perspective, we're at a point in time where a particular population was being singled out and under attack, essentially. And so she wanted to bring attention to that, but not to the exclusion of others. So my sense was that...
I don't know that I got that from any information that I read.
Yeah, well, but that's...
It's to the exclusion of everything else.
No, but it's not, and that's where, with what I read, is the wording of the motion, which was, it says, including, but... was it? So things like condemn Islamophobia and all forms of systemic racism and religious discrimination. So that's that blanket piece that it was to say to her as her motion to her constituents that she represents the Muslim community she felt was under attack. I'll tell you that I looked very closely at the conservative legislation, and so if anybody's not aware, as Chris' motion was going through the legislative process, there are opposition days where the opposition parties are allowed to introduce their own legislation. And so the Conservative Party took Icar's motion word for word, and except for stripping out Islamophobia, and introduced that and said, let's study everything. And I voted against it simply because I felt that minimized or really downplayed what we're seeing happen to the Muslim community specifically, and knowing that Icar's motion would in fact still be inclusive of those other religions and issues. So it's kind of I would say a nuance in it, but because of the conversations I had in this riding and what I saw the outcomes were between the two bills, I just felt that because of the special need of the Muslim community right now, that they deserve some special attention, but not to the exclusion of others.
Well, then can you guarantee when they look at the study that obviously is done in the next 100 days, that what comes out of it, that there's no blasphemy laws? Because even looking at Islamophobia, what's the definition of Islamophobia? Can I say to my neighbor, I'm concerned about what I'm seeing as far as terrorist activity, and where is it coming from?
Right, and what I'd said at the beginning is that with the motion, it's not binding, it doesn't impose anything on the government, and so it doesn't affect your ability to say whatever you want. It's saying to the government, look at things.
But can you guarantee that? Because I actually read an article by a Muslim woman in the National Post, and that's exactly what she herself was saying. She didn't like this motion because that's exactly what's the blasphemy laws and Sharia laws is what she sees coming.
Right.
That's a Muslim woman who said that.
Yeah, remember, this is non-binding. It has nothing. It doesn't do anything legislatively. It doesn't do anything.
But does it not work to that?
Yes.
No.
Eventually.
Yeah.
Can you guarantee that?
I can guarantee it's
because this is what's come in England and other countries around the world, and they are now Sharia compliant.
Then why is there a motion anyway if there's going to be nothing done with it?
Like I say,
I have the same fear.
Yeah, these are private members' business, and like I said, on the first day of sitting, we had two things that were done that first day. The first was to choose a speaker for the House who oversees the proceedings of the House. The second was to draw the order of precedence for private members' business. So that was the day that all the names were drawn, and Ikra's name came up on, I don't know what number she was, but she was ahead of me and I'm 79. And so, like these are, the whole point of private members' business is that it's for the member whose number is before the House to put forward whatever they feel is important. And so this is very much what Ikra felt was, as I said, important to her and her community. And so any of us, when it's our turn, can put forward essentially whatever we want. And so it went through the private members process. There are rules assigned to when private members business gets debated and how it gets debated. It's different than government legislation. And you can do things as motions or as bills. And hers is a motion which is non-binding. So, and you haven't had a chance to speak, so is there...
I totally agree, and there is no definition of Islamophobia. There isn't one because it doesn't exist. It is not. You can't be afraid of Islam when Islam is not a religion. And there's also criminal code already in place, so we don't need another motion to deal with what's already in place. That's one thing.
And to that, it's simply, it's non-binding, it's not
It says
legislative.
Jews are way more persecuted in Canada than Muslims.
Well, and when I talk about the increase, I don't have the end number. I think that, ultimately, there's issues with hate crime, and as I mentioned, the numbers are overall down. It's not to say that the Jewish community doesn't deserve attention. There have been motions actually, and Greg, do you remember what year there was an anti-Semitism motion that was passed in the House of Commons?
Amnesty in 2015.
2015, okay. So something, specifically to anti-Semitism was passed in the House. Interestingly enough, in the fall, was it December of January, what was the year, the month when Tom Mulcair introduced his anti-Islamophobia motion?
Yeah, it was a motion that was introduced after question period that has to be unanimously adopted by the House in order to go forward and be legitimized, and it was by all members of the House, including.
Yeah, which preceded this one, but in the same session of the House. And so, it's the interesting thing is that they could decide to do it a different way than actually allow the House to have discussion the way that Mr. Mulcair did it, was again to raise an issue to a specific population that he felt was of concern. And that one, it was simply, a vote, it received unanimous consent, and is entered into the record of the House, and we move on.
Then leave it as Muslims, not Islamophobia. That word should not be in there. Because it cannot be defined, and it has not been that.
And phobia is like
And
a
phobia
mental-
is yes, exactly.
Anxiety.
Look what a phobia is, because it is not the right wording.
Well, like I say, this was Icar's motion, and it's now being studied, and that's where we're at. But I appreciate the feedback. As I said, I did have various perspectives put forward, and I voted in favor of the piece to have this already done, and it's down before the Heritage Committee. I'll go over here, and then I'll come back over here.
So just a point of clarification. So I'm hearing, I think I'm hearing say, so you're saying it's a motion, so it doesn't go into a bill? Is that how it goes?
No.
That's correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's just a motion put forward that's saying, hey, we should be nice to everybody.
Let's study what's going on. Now, the government in their response can say, you know what, we're going to have a response, a legislative response to it, but they're not obligated to do that.
Which then would become a bill or something?
If the government decided to, they could introduce it in something as a bill, but they're not obligated, and it's very much at the executive's discretion to decide what they're going to put forward on their legislative agenda.
Yeah, because I think
I was just going to ask, just for
We're
clarity.
not done now.
sorry, the jelly bean comment on the chocolate lobster. It's because I think the clarification, I think the Islamophobic thing is, I think what I hear when I hear that is that the religion can't be criticized. And in other nations, we see people who do not convert to that religion are beheaded. We see it on YouTube. You can YouTube it. I don't actually watch the movies myself. Can't handle graphic. But like that's what happens when you don't convert to that religion. However, the people, the individuals, I feel should be protected. Like the Muslim people, individuals in Canada should be protected because we all enjoy religious freedom as our privilege, and that is very important. I think that should be upheld. But I'm not hearing the differentiation between the religion can't be spoken against. I mean, we're allowed to like criticize or comment, criticize. They're your beliefs, but not attack the person.
Right, and to go back, that's not the intention of this motion. Like I say, it's a study to understand what's happening in society. That was under one MP's member's business, and that's what went before the House. So, anyway, I'm just going to jump over to a gentleman who haven't had a chance to ask a question, and then I'll go.
That was a little bit along with the younger woman over there also. I think at the least it seems to me that the word Islamophobia seems to be an unfortunate choice of word because it potentially at least leads towards the mixing up of hating people, which is basically where we have words for like anti-so-and-so bigotry or whatever, racism, whatever you want to call it. And on the other hand, we have, in this case, a religion or in general an idea which has to be able to be debated, criticized, or whatnot. And I think where the concern is for many people, and of course that's maybe where you can answer it as our representative in the future, is really, you know, are our Canadian representatives, in this case you, going to make that distinction in the future, right? I mean, that this is being upheld as a clear distinction, that part is not going to be muddled. Because in my opinion also this is one specific example, but that could lead down a slippery slope for many other issues as well. You know, the protection of a people, a race, a bigotry, and on the other hand, the discussion of ideas, whatever it might be. In the past, we had situations where you couldn't be a communist, right, or speak up as that, and you would have problems. But I think these are two distinct things, and I think what I would expect, from my point, as you as my representative, that you would uphold this distinction within Canada at least.
Great, yeah, thanks. This is all really useful conversation, so thank you. I'm going to go, Zareen had a comment, and then Ken, you wanted to make a comment. So
I think this is a very interesting discussion. As a member of the Muslim community, I congratulated John for supporting the bill. I do understand, and I do take the point that the word Islamophobia may not be the most appropriate, but as I think we are hearing and we know that there are lots of the issues have risen up partly because of the US, partly because of Brexit, and partly because of what's happening with ISIS and others, that there is a lot of incidents of hatred and incidents against the Muslim community. They are feeling the heat, they are feeling the hatred. So I think it is a good recognition, and we were very happy that it was supported. On the other hand, I think this assumption that this bill will naturally lead to Sharia law being imposed, as a Muslim, I would be totally opposed to it, because many of us as in the Muslim community oppose it, and also have felt the persecution of those laws in other countries and have decided to come to Canada. So I think we feel that the freedom of practicing a religion, whatever religion it may be, is such a great thing in this country. And so while Islamophobia is a reality right now that many people are facing, and this bill recognizes that, just moving on and assuming that we will now become a Sharia state, I think is not going to happen. I hope never happens.
Again, thank you. And Ken, we were going to
I'm not new, as a member of Parliament, I too have had a lot of engagement on this. First, the term Islamophobia. A phobia is an irrational fear. You know what lorophobia is? Fear of cats, right? So it's one thing to have an irrational fear of something, but if that irrational fear leads you to want to harm the thing that you're afraid of, is where it kind of crosses a line. I think the difficulty that many people have, me included, is that the term Islamophobia is not the right term. Now, here's what's going to happen. The committee, the all-party standing committee on Canadian heritage, is going to take this thing apart. You will all have an opportunity to put your 2 cents worth in there, because they're going to open up a portal for the public to talk to them about your feelings on it. And I am sure they're going to hear a lot of people say, you've got to have a better term than Islamophobia. But let's also look at what this committee has the potential to do. We have hate laws, absolutely. And to the point that you made about Sharia law and others, expressing that fear, or expressing the fear that somehow they could be sanctioned for speaking against the Islam or Muslims or Catholics or anybody else. This is where our Charter of Rights and Freedoms come in. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms, even today, on another issue altogether, struck down legislation that clearly operated against freedoms that Canadians enjoy. So your safety valve is always the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. But finally, let's look at what this committee can do. I'm an ex-broadcaster. I used to be on the radio. Anybody remember Pat Burns?
Yeah.
Used to produce his show a long time ago. And I was really disturbed by the behavior of broadcasters in Quebec City, where the shootings took place. The Quebec law even have a term for it. They call it radio poubelle, trash radio. A station there lost its license twice for spewing out hatred. And it occurs to me that one of the things that this committee can do is to come up with a framework where if we have a community where things are going off the rails, where the temperature is going up, and we're not dealing with the heavy hand of legislation or even regulation, but there are some things that this committee could recommend where a community can step forward and say, hey, things are getting out of hand here, let's just lower the temperature. What are our options to do that? And I think that that's more likely what you will find coming out of this committee, rather than, recommendations for legislation or regulations. The chair of this committee is none other than Dr. Eddie Fry. He's a libertarian and a good free thinker. I don't think she, for a moment, would abide by anything that went against the charter or took away your freedom of expression. But it's like Abraham Lincoln once said, my freedom to swing my fist stops at the point where it meets your nose. Okay? So that's really the consideration that this is really looking at.
Thanks. Can I go to the back?
Just one quick point about the charter. I think for many of us who come from a different country, I was born in Canada, been raised here, and it's very much a privilege for us to say that we're Canadian. And one of the key reasons is the charter, and because we know that we have freedom of speech, freedom of religion. It's such a benefit to us as citizens. And so if we start dividing ourselves and looking at religious aspects, or sort of saying, why can they do this and why can't, it really divides us as a nation. And so I'm happy to hear about these kinds of motions, because I know that if as a group of people I am being attacked for a particular reason because of religion, or race, or gender, etc., I know that I have leadership and support in the community to back me. So, because fear doesn't help us in any way. It really just divides us.
And just on the pitch for the charter, I think it just was the 35th anniversary was just last week or something. So there you have it. We're down to the last 2 minutes. Is there anybody who didn't have a chance to make a comment or ask a question, realizing that
okay, you are our representative,
yes.
And you are number 79. So, is there a big reveal when you ask that question, or do we have to wait? I'm just wondering. What are you thinking about?
We did. Hopefully many or everybody here has received the newsletters that I send out. And so we did a couple of them that said, hey, my private members bill is going to be coming up, and do you have any ideas? And so we had some submissions, and my team looked at issues, things we've heard on the doorsteps. I looked at my background and things that I was interested in. And so we narrowed it down to 3 topics. And the ones that we're working on right now, one of our constituents, in fact, Sammy had to leave. Okay. Sammy was here. His dad was involved in introducing a United Nations motion for International Mother Languages Day, which is to recognize the importance of mother tongues. And he's had it declared by the United Nations and asked if I could champion. So that was one that we've had a look at, and we actually have a draft piece of legislation on that. It's a motion So non-binding, but it's a way of recognizing work that's happening in our constituency. Another one related to the discussions in the riding is related to daycare and the whole question of daycare. And so we are working on one that would, again, be a motion to get a committee to study daycare options and how we can make daycare more expansive. Now, part of the focus of that one was actually responded to in the budget 2017. And so that one's dropped down a bit. The third one that we're working on drafting right now, comes from my experience, and it's in part I've been doing a lot of work within the heritage community and our riding. But for those of you who don't know, I was with Parks Canada for more than 3 decades. In the last decade, I was the manager of National Historic Sites. I had also managed historic sites in other parts of the country. And there is not one cohesive or comprehensive piece of legislation related to heritage management in Canada. And so I've been dealing with the National Trust and some other organizations, and we're putting together a comprehensive bill right now related to the management of national historic sites in Canada. We pull together pieces of legislation from all over the place and bring it into one tight bill that would provide oversight of or consolidated legislation related to management of historic sites in Canada. So we're drafting that one as well, and we'll have all 3 ready to go. And when my number comes up is when we decide which one will actually advance. And that one is the most complex, and I have to have discussions still with the department and see if there would be government support or possibly government support for it. But those are the 3 ideas that we're working on.
Oh, thank you.
So with that, we've reached 8 o'clock, and I just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I find this really useful. Hopefully you found it a good use of your time. It's important for me to have this kind of open and frank discussions and hear diverse opinions. Sometimes it's after the fact on things like M103, but I think it's important to to be held to explain and to hear various perspectives on things. So I appreciate everybody coming out and sharing very openly your thoughts and issues. And if you have other things, updates, check the website. As I said, it's johnaldaymp.ca, and enjoy your evening. Thank you.